Taylor up on the hill with Sovereign Harmony Astrology. Thanks for joining me this week. We're going to talk about the astrology for the week of August 2nd today through the 8th. Okay, so second week of August here. Well, kind of the first week, I guess, depending on how you look at it. But we are in eclipse season as we speak. So eclipse season takes off the lunation just before the two eclipses will occur. That was what we just had this past week. We're coming off of this full moon in Aquarius, very powerful, conjunct Pluto. I'll review that in a second. Okay, that opened up the window. It'll close on September 10th with the new moon in Virgo, but in between we'll have our two eclipses for this season specifically, which will be next week's total solar eclipse in Leo at 20 degrees, and then we'll have a lunar eclipse in Pisces at 5 degrees later in the month, okay? But just to review, coming off of this very powerful full moon in Aquarius, asking us to release anything in our space, essentially, that is preventing us from seeing the future and opening to the people that'll be part of that future, okay? By releasing, what is standing in that way, what limits in our thoughts for our future, and the people and associations in our space that limit us to our former perceptions of our self-worth. Because again, this lunation was also squaring Chiron in Taurus at the same time that the sun was joining Jupiter in Leo. So we're in this expansion of confidence, expansion of who we are, and being asked to essentially release what is basically a reflection of our limitations from the past. Okay, so getting bigger. All right, so that opens up this eclipse season, and we're in it. Okay, and then immediately here this week on Monday, the 3rd, Chiron is turning retrograde in Taurus. Okay, so we just squared that Chiron in Taurus with this full moon, asking us to dig into those wounds associated with self-worth, again, which are based on limitations that are perceptions that aren't necessarily true. And so it's, Chiron has only moved into Taurus, not even a degree, really. And it's gonna move back, and it'll be back in Aries in September. Won't come back to Taurus until April of 2027. That's when the real work is going to be done in terms of facing those wounds associated with self-worth, okay? But we got that preview, and it got to be brought in with the initiatory full moon that brought in eclipse season this year, okay? So self-worth is definitely up for discussion, up for contemplation, for sure, but the real work, again, will be for next spring in the 7 years beyond that to 2034. Okay. Also, this week on Thursday, so there's not a lot going on this week. It's actually a pretty quiet week. We need it after last week's big full moon that we're still in. We're still in this energy. We're still releasing, still realizing who in our space maybe needs to go or needs boundaries laid so that we can move forward to our future. And be open to those new people that will be part of that future, okay? Very important, and again, that's a reflection of our burgeoning self-worth, okay? But later this week on Thursday, there's actually 3 things happening, and then that'll be it for this week. But the first one is Venus entering Libra. So Venus has been in Virgo for several weeks. Venus in Virgo is great about details in organization, etc., but it's kind of limiting to the heart space. Venus in Libra, that's one of its homes. And so Venus in Libra is going to be a little more expansive in the heart space. It might feel a little lighter than our hearts have been feeling the last several weeks with Venus in Virgo. So that is, just a chance to kind of expand upon that sense of self-worth, okay? And that can mean, showing ourselves off a little bit more. So there's an aesthetic aspect to Venus in Libra. How we present ourselves can be a reflection of that, again, growing self-worth, etc. So a little lighter. Okay. Also, we have Mercury exiting its shadow zone. So Mercury entered the shadow zone back in June, and it entered Cancer back in June as well. And it's spending 2 months in Cancer. So it'll still be in Cancer till next Sunday, August 9th. But that's about a 2-month period, like I said, of Mercury in Cancer, because Mercury retrograded across, I think it was like 15 to 25 or 16 to 26 degrees of Cancer, whatever it was. And now it's exiting that degree of we're retrograde, so 25, 26 degrees or so here on Thursday. And so that's done, right? And then when it exits Cancer on Sunday, next Sunday, it's like, oh, we finally get a breather from Cancer energy, right? Because remember, back last year, early last summer, Jupiter entered Cancer, and we've had this whole year of emotional growth associated with that Jupiter in Cancer. And then when Mercury turned retrograde here in the last several weeks, it's been in Cancer, reviewing and reevaluating that emotional growth. Okay, so it's just a lot of going deep into our feelings, okay, churning through that, understanding, how that can be more useful for us instead of pushing it down, for example. Okay, and so it can seem like, okay, on Sunday when Mercury, so Mercury's exiting its shadow on Thursday, exits Cancer altogether on Sunday, and we think, all right, we're getting a respite from Cancer energy, from all that depth, in that, which can feel a little drowning in some cases, okay? But then 2 days later, next week, which we'll talk about next week more, Mars is actually going to enter Cancer, and that'll be in Cancer until September 27th. So 7 weeks of Mars in Cancer. After about a 36-hour window where we have a break from anything in Cancer, we get another round of Cancer energy. That's going to have a lot to do with taking action according to those feelings, according to what we've discovered about ourselves, what we feel, and so with less fear, because we have more confidence in what we've grown through emotionally. Okay, so it's gonna be a lot of action, or emotionally based action is going to be a theme for the second half of August all the way through September. Okay, so what we've discovered in the last year, what we reevaluated in the last couple months, we start taking action on. Okay, but again, we'll get to that next week. And the final thing on Thursday is the Sun in Leo will trine Saturn retrograde in Aries. Okay, and this is a warm up for next week's solar eclipse on the 12th. Okay, because it'll still be an orb to Saturn, and that's going to be part of the story. So really, we need a whole week to kind of warm up to this whole idea, and that idea is that we're going through an ego death. Okay, and it's kind of a death and rebirth. Okay, with the trine to Saturn and Aries, it's basically saying we're responsible for our authenticity. Leo can move away from authenticity and move into performance, move into the show, the mask. Okay, and so what this Leo solar eclipse next week is going to be about is events happening over the coming months that force us to take off our mask, force us to drop the performance and align with our authenticity, so that any egoic expression we have is more in alignment with that authenticity and less in alignment with just what we think we need to be or that show we think we need to put on. But that warm-up starts again this week, and it's going to be part of that solar eclipse that'll be with us as it ripples out into the future. So taking off the mask, ego death, to replace it with a more ego representative aspect of our authenticity. Okay, that's really the key to what this total solar eclipse in Leo is going to be about. And after that, the lunar eclipse, just as a preview, later in the month, that'll be in Pisces. That's going to be a doozy. Okay, so we'll get more into that as the month goes on. But as we take off this mask, that's going to allow some really authentic power, authentic intuition and emotion to flow in. Okay, almost like that mask is a dam. It comes off, and whew, what we've evaluated, what we've grown through emotionally with Jupiter and Cancer in the last year and everything else, it moves up an octave into kind of like the Pisces realm of emotion and intuition. And some powerful things can happen when we unleash the whole that we are. And so that's what a lot of this eclipse season is about, is removing the mask that prevents the whole that we are. And that whole that we are involves, all the stuff we've pushed down, all the stuff that is scary to us, that is actually part of what makes us everything that we are. So I'm going to leave it at that. If you have any questions, please let me know. If you have any comments, comment below. If you're interested in a personal reading and where all this fits into your chart, let me know as well, and we can set that up. And you can find me at Sovereign Harmony Astrology, whether you're on YouTube, whether you're on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, whatever your vice is, you can find me there. And if you don't have any questions, we will see you next week. Enjoy this week of August 2nd to the 8th, and we'll see you next time for the solar eclipse talk. Take care.